All right, thank you for joining me for my speech today. Landlines have mostly become a thing of the past, thanks in large to an invention and popularity of cell phones. Human connection, shopping, and even education has expanded to homes all across the world with the affordability and accessibility of computers within more and more homes. My name is Ryan, and today I'm going to tell you about Steve Jobs' childhood, how he went on to have a successful career, and the lasting legacy he left in the world. Today I will be covering Steve Jobs' childhood, Steve Jobs' rise to success, and the legacy of this brilliant man. Generally speaking, childhood is a short period of time in most of our lives. According to a book titled Steve Jobs Thinks Different, Steve Jobs was born in Silicon Valley, California in 1955 and was adopted by his parents, Paul and Clara Jobs. He grew up with a younger sister in a working class family that did not have a lot of money. In this book, it is said that Steve was very smart but did not like school. He struggled to focus but was easily motivated with bribery. Bribery worked so well that Steve ended up doing so much schoolwork in 4th grade that he ended up skipping the 5th grade entirely. In Walter Isaacson's book titled Steve Jobs, Steve grew up rummaging through junkyards for old cars and car parts to fix up with his dad. The profit he made from these projects was put directly into a fund for Steve's future college education. Isaacson wrote in his book about how Steve was very smart. He had already skipped a grade and was socially awkward. This led him to being bullied in school. Eventually, his parents saved up enough money to move to another house, putting Steve in a new middle school where things improved greatly for him. Isaacson also wrote how, as a teenager, Steve joined a club called the Hewlett-Packard Explorers Club, where he learned about engineers' jobs and built projects. Steve was attempting to build a project and needed some parts. So he called up the CEO of HP and asked for parts. The CEO was so impressed that he gave Steve Jobs the parts he needed and a job at the company. In an article titled Steve Jobs, written in the Salem Press Biographical Encyclopedia, Steve graduated high school and enrolled in class at Reed College in Oregon, where he later dropped out and moved back home after only 1 year. He then began working at Atari with his longtime friend Steve Wozniak. It's hard to imagine a world without the technology and conveniences that we have today. According to the newspaper article titled Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish, The Life of Steve Jobs, published in the Kathmandu Post, Steve Jobs and his partner Steve Wozniak started Apple in Steve Jobs' garage using only $1,300 that they had raised by selling a calculator and a Volkswagen bus. This was where the first Apple I computer was made. In the same article as previously talked about, titled Steve Jobs, Steve went on to create the Apple II computer, the Macintosh computer, and the Next Computer Company. Following that, Steve purchased the computer graphics division of Lucasfilms and renamed it Pixar Animation Studios, where he then produced the popular movie Toy Story. Many of us have used computers and technology for school, work, and recreational purposes. The movie Toy Story was still and is very popular and happens to be one of my favorite movies as a child. In this same article titled Steve Jobs in 2001, Steve created iTunes and later that same year the iPod. In 2003, Steve created the iTunes Music Store. Growing up in the early 2000s, the introduction of music onto devices was such a huge change and something that I thought was so cool. The article titled Steve Jobs also talks about how Steve sold Pixar to Walt Disney Company in 2006 and earned himself a spot as a major shareholder on Disney's board of directors. In 2007, 1 year after selling Pixar to Walt Disney, Steve created the iPhone. The iPhone was not only a cell phone, but also a camera, video camera, internet, and could run apps. This was a huge success and changed the world drastically. Eventually, Steve went on to create the iPad as well. Most adults have a cell phone and have benefited from the conveniences of this genius device that allows us to access the world and carry a camera with us wherever we go. With a list of world-changing inventions, devices as long as this, it is not hard to see what a lasting impact Steve Jobs had on the world. In a magazine article titled Steve Jobs, A Purposeful Life, written by Eric Lundquist, Steve Jobs created products and ideas in the world that has had a lasting impact past his death in 2011. Aside from the technology that Steve created, he also became a model for entrepreneurs and dreamers alike. In this same article, Eric Lundquist states that it is a full journey and exhibiting an Apple II at the West Coast Computer Fair in 1977 to becoming an iconic public figure on the scale of Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and just maybe Leonardo da Vinci. Steve Jobs was a world changer and had an impact so great that he is being compared to the greatest inventors, creators of all time. In a newspaper article titled Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish, The Life of Steve Jobs, it is stated, "What we have today in our digital world would not have been possible without Steve Jobs' reality distortion field." In a newspaper article from Canadian Press titled Obama's Statement on Death of Apple Co-founder Steve Jobs, the United States President Barack Obama stated, "Michelle and I are saddened to learn of the passing of Steve Jobs. Steve was among the greatest of American innovators, brave enough to think differently, bold enough to believe he could change the world, and talented enough to do so." Steve Jobs ended up being nominated in 2004, 2005, 2007, 2008, and again in 2010 for a Time's Most Influential People. In conclusion, the world is a much better place because of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had a fairly ordinary childhood, went on to have a successful career, and then left a lasting legacy on the world. Today I talked about Steve Jobs' childhood, Steve Jobs' rise to success, the legacy of Steve Jobs. Many of us wrote our speeches using the technology and devices created by this brilliant man, and everybody watching these speeches are doing so thanks to Steve Jobs.